If you actually want to improve in League of Legends, this video is for you. I'm a challenger coach with over 3 years of experience and I've helped hundreds of players reach their goal. And today I'm going to teach you guys how to actually improve in League of Legends, backed up by science. So how does improvement actually work? Well, League of Legends is a game of habits, and habits are the neural networks that are wired in our brain. So if we want to improve in League, we want to be changing these habits and creating new neural networks. And the way that it works in our brain is by creating errors, making mistakes. We've all heard it before. Because without errors, the brain is not in a position to change itself. Errors cue the prefrontal cortex networks and activate neuromodulators like dopamine, acetylcholine, epinephrine, and these neuromodulators will allow for plasticity and changes in the brain. A mouthful. Maybe it sounds boring to you. If you want to see more, check out the description. I got the sources right there. But generally, what you want to understand is that if you feel shit, your brain is going to solve the issue of you feeling shit for yourself. So if you make mistakes, you recognize them. Your nervous system is going to send signals to your brain that wants to solve these mistakes. And if you can then direct your attention to where we want to be creating the new network, so you want to be directing your attention towards the stuff that you want to change, that's how you form new habits and that's how you get better at the game. Your brain will literally take care of the rest. So we're going to now make this more practical and really look at how do we apply this very specifically to League. So how long does it actually take to form a new habit and what can we realistically expect? Well, learning skills and creating new habits actually takes time. Of course, your brain needs time to adjust, but it's not really about hours or time in itself. It's more about repetitions, because every single repetition is gonna activate your brain in sending these neuromodulators towards your prefrontal cortex. And especially the mistakes that you make will allow your brain to send these neuromodulators, which means that you can now create new neural networks a lot easier. And on average, it's going to take about 3 to 4 weeks to learn and master a new habit. But this is time. It isn't really about time. It's actually about repetition. So if you get a lot more reps in than the average person, maybe you can do it in 2 weeks or maybe even 1 week. While if you need to play it a little bit slower, you don't have that much time to play League. Maybe it's going to take you 5 or 6 weeks instead of 3 and 4. So now we have these active neuromodulators in our brain, giving our brain signals. How do we turn these into the right neural network? So how do we know what we are supposed to be focusing in? How do we know what we're supposed to be doing? Well, this can be done through either error correction and or positive reinforcement of the brain. So error correction is very simply avoiding the stuff that doesn't go right. And positive reinforcement is by actually doing the stuff that you know you are doing right more often. And that is being signaled by the neurotransmitter dopamine, who is then signaling that towards your brain. And the way that we can figure out how to or what to focus on is through the feedback loop. There's an open loop and there's a closed loop of type of feedback whenever you're learning skills. And open loop feedback is very simple, is getting immediate feedback from an action. So you go for an all-in, you die, you have very clear understanding that something didn't work out. It gives you direct feedback that something didn't go well, and it's for you to investigate what didn't go well. That's open loop feedback. Very, very easy. Another good example is a trading pattern. Maybe you tried a trade versus a Talon, and what happens is that he hits you back double as hard, and you don't really understand what it is. So you go into review, you figure it out. Very easy to understand what happened because it's open loop and it has a direct result. You also got closed loop feedback, and this is usually quite tricky to spot, and this is where a lot of people struggle with. It's more of a continuous action. A really good example is, for example, win condition assessment, sometimes even wave management, because people don't see the immediate feedback from what happens with the wave state. It can also be just general mid-game decision making. This is very hard to spot yourself, and if you potentially don't even know what to look for, compared to, for example, a real world example, if you're going to be playing tennis and you want to be doing a forehand, right? If you don't know the exact technique that works with the best forehand, it's very hard to fix that yourself. So coaching really helps with these closed loop feedback systems that are present, but that is quite hard for you to spot. This comes up to the learning objective, right? If you really want to improve in League of Legends, it's very good to have a learning objective, one specific thing to focus on. And what you can do is you can set yourself a learning objective. You can have a coach set yourself a learning objective, give you clear examples of what to look for, how it should look. And then by getting these repetitions in, getting that feedback loop running over and over and over again, through error correction and positive reinforcement, whenever you compare your situation to how it's supposed to be looking, your brain is going to go like, happy, let's do more of this. While if you recognize, ooh, they didn't really go the way that I want, I should avoid this. Then what's also going to happen is that your brain is going to try to avoid it. And slowly over time, instead of you like doing it, like never doing it, suddenly you can do it 1% of the time. Then a few days later, you can do it 5% of the time. Then 1 week later, you can do it 15% of the time. And then 2 weeks later, you can do it 40% of the time. And then 3 weeks later, you can do it 60% of the time. And slowly but surely, your brain is going to be changing your neural networks into you being able to do this over and over and over in a higher consistency basis. So how to improve step by step? Step 1, get as many repetitions in as possible. Step 2, pay attention to all the errors that you made and highlight the successful attempts of what you're focusing on. This will then in turn make your neuromodulators work and give you rewards like dopamine, and that's going to then allow you to change your neural networks. Then do nothing. This is where people lose it. People make the biggest mistake in this particular step. Step 3 is where people ruin everything. After a game, after a review, after your tree block, the best, even in between games, right? The best thing that you can do is literally nothing. No other input in your brain. No phone, no WhatsApp, no shorts, no YouTube, no music, no lights, you know? Nothing. Just close your eyes. Let your brain put all your experiences and errors and successful attempts in a row for 5 to 10 minutes. Let everything settle before doing anything. And this will allow your brain to put everything in the right order. And I've really found this myself when I made the climb to Challenger. This is already what I was doing. I was cutting out shorts for my entire day. In between my games, my messages, my DMs, everything was off. I had nothing. And this allowed me to make insane progress in such a short period of time. Even that it shocked me how fast my progress became. So this is by far the number one most important thing to do, which no one does. And then step 4, sleep. Because in your sleep, your brain actually connects the neural networks and makes the new connections in your brain, which will then allow you to the next day or the day after, or maybe a week after, to slowly increase that percentage of how good that you're going to be improving in a specific habit. So I'm not instantly winning. How do I know that I'm actually getting better? How do I know that I'm actually improving at creating this new habit? Well, it really depends on what you're practicing. Are you doing an easy or a complicated learning objective? If you're looking at your warding, for example, warding and leaning, it's a very easy learning objective that you can probably fix up and see results and improvements into within a week even. While if you're trying to learn window creation, managing minion waves in such a way that you can create favorable wave states so you can get better quality trades, for me, it took me 2 months to even get remotely an understanding of how it works, right? So really put it in perspective what you're actually learning. But my recommendation is look at the percentages. So to give you guys a little bit of an understanding of what that means. So it took me 2 months to get a decent understanding of how to create trading windows in lane. And the way that I knew that was that after like 3 or 4 weeks, I had this one game. I had this one game in which that I played so fucking well that I knew that this was something that was impossible for me to do 3 or 4 weeks ago. This was my first 1%er game. This was the one time that I executed it upon it. And that made me very proud. I felt like I actually got better. And you got to just look at the percentages. If you look at that 4 weeks after that again, suddenly, instead of me doing that for the first time, I actually did it once, probably every 10%, once every 10 games. I did it quite decently. And that means that I actually made a lot of progress in that regard, even though I wasn't to the point where I could just apply it without putting a single bit of mental energy towards it, I was already improving and got to a point where I knew I was getting better, which also ties back towards how do you feel when executing the learning objective? Are you feeling mega overwhelmed, or are you starting to feel like it becomes a little bit easier, a little bit faster without like actually compromising different parts of your gameplay or actually your execution, right? That's when you also recognize that, hey, I can much more easily implement these type of learning objectives in the game. And that's when you know that you're going to be improving. And you do this over a period of time. And you do this on like 3 or 4 or 5 different learning objectives. And that is usually the difference between you being where you're at right now and you being 200 LP higher. So this slide is just so unbelievably important. I see this on a daily basis. Everyone's making this mistake. I've made this mistake in the past as well. And it's just guaranteed to keep you hard stuck. Number 1, theory overload. This is what your average league coach on Fiverr or whatever, Metafy, I don't know what is, will do. Right? They'll review a game for 2 hours straight. They'll give you 25 million different points to work on. Good luck. In the game, you won't be able to learn and improve because you won't be able to create any new habits. You don't know what to focus on. You're going to get absolutely overloaded. This also means that even if you have a normal session of like about a half hour and you'll find that there's 20 different things in the game that you can potentially focus on, the reality is pick 1 or 2 maximum and focus on that so you can actually see what you're supposed to do and remove the errors in that specific part of your gameplay. If you focus on all the 20 things at the same time, you will make net 0 improvements. Another thing that you see is that people just try to do stuff that's too advanced for the level. I had someone ask me, which is a silver player last week, a silver player that asked me how to create trading windows in lane with understanding which means to auto-attack. Or I was like, no way we're going to be teaching you that. It's just not practical. Like in silver, there's so many other important things that you need to work on. Just controlling your champion, understanding what your champion is supposed to be doing, understanding what your champion's identity is. It doesn't make sense looking at creating trading windows in silver. It's crazy. And another thing is that, and this shit, like I see it every day, man. It's just really sad because a lot of people just don't respect the time and the effort that it takes to actually learn an actual learning objective. People think that they actually have solved a particular learning objective. I give a very common learning objective I give is utilize your lull states to identify the next neutral objective and be there on time, push the final middle wave before it, and make sure that you contest it. So utilize your lull stats for that. Actively ping it in the chat. That's as practical as I can give it, a learning objective. And then I get a message a week later, okay, I want to move on. I think I've solved it. So he comes into a new session. And in that session, with that exact same VOD that he brings, we see the exact same issues like we said last time. I will just very simply say to him, hey, this is exactly what we call, you don't do this consistently enough. This is still your weakest part of your gameplay. You need to solve this before we move on. And this is so unbelievably common. The respect that it takes to actually create new habits, it takes some time, guys. And once you get towards those like 40, 50%ers where you can do this more consistently, that's when you've actually implemented the learning objective. So at the start of the video, I said, if you're a casual, go to the next one because motivation is so unbelievably important. They did a study, right? And the study is, of course, going to be in the description in one of the links. And in that study, basically the results of this was the people that are more motivated will have a lot more plasticity in their brain and have a lot easier time creating new habits and creating new neural networks. If you don't have that motivation, especially when you're old, you're really gonna struggle to create these new habits, and it's very easy for you to just stay right where you are and not really see any improvement. So we've talked about directing your focus. And what a lot of people unfortunately do and make the mistake in is that they look at the wins and losses instead of the actual learning objective and the errors that they made in game. So what happens is they direct their neuromodulators to basically give you feedback over the result over the game. And that means that you're going to start creating neural networks that then allow you to feel good whenever you win and allow you to feel shit whenever you lose. But it doesn't really allow you to create new habits of what you're actually doing in the game. It's just the result. And this leads usually towards addiction or frustration or powerlessness in that regard. And it will make you indirectly make it impossible for you to create new habits because you're not focusing on the right thing. It's actually a very sad thing. Um, and I've like, of course, everyone has somewhat battled with this in their league journey, but some players are actually a lot worse with this than others. And it's just how your brain's always been giving yourself feedback. And for the players that are like very used to doing this, randomly changing this is such a hard thing. And I really feel for those players. Like those players have it probably the hardest of all of us, depending on wherever they're at in their journey. Like it's just so hard to let go of it. It's like a gambling addiction in a way. It's very sad, but there is a way, of course, to change it. And there's some recommendations that we give in our coaching platform. It's the no look LP challenge. So just completely not looking at the LP after a game. So closing client. We also have a specific app for that in the MLA. I'm not sure what it exactly is. I think we call it no looksies or something like that. And what we're just going to try to do is whenever we're working a coaching session, when I work with someone like this, is that I'm going to be giving him a very clear, graspable, feelable learning objective. Something that they can totally understand and totally focus on, which is then going to allow them to direct their attention towards that instead of the wins and the losses. And yeah, this is something that you see so often with a lot of players. Some people are like very struggling with this, others less so. But it is a very big issue because it's so easy to see the win of the loss, but not really what's actually happened in game. So we also got to talk about the learning journey differences because everyone's different and every player has a different starting point and where they're at right now. And it really depends on how you want to be approaching learning and where you're at right now. As a general rule of thumb, the more advanced you are, the more specific you got to get. While if you're more or less a beginner, you need to just get the reps in. And this is one thing that I really want to highlight, is that whenever you're in your early stage of league, matter of fact, you're in, for example, iron to bronze, right? Generally, you don't want to review that much and you just want to get as many repetitions in as possible, get in the repetitions, let your brain soak up as much information as possible. Well, if you're towards Master Plus, we got to get into the details. Like we got to get specific. Just getting the reps in isn't enough anymore. We need to direct your focus. So the newer you are to the game, or the newer you are to a champion even, if you're playing a new champion, or you're learning a new champ, the first 30 games, just play the champ. Just get a feeling of the champ, because you playing the champ is already going to make your brain like give so many more neural networks and get so much learning, create so much new habits already on the champion because you're so fresh on the champ. And the more you're going to get into what your champion journey, the more important it is to get specific, solve different positions in your game. And a lot of beginner players make the mistakes by over-reviewing and actually doing too much while they should actually be doing less. While most of the advanced players actually do the complete opposite, where they review too little, they don't get specific enough, they just play the game, they spam the games, and they just get themselves hardstuck around, usually at somewhere in Master, actually. So as a final note, I wanted to also like point out, like, what do I actually do as a coach? Like, what is my job? How am I gonna help players that want my help? So my number one job is to direct the focus from the player, both in game and out of game, so that we can actually focus on doing the right things and also preventing the stuff that is holding us back. So we're heavily looking at error correction and also positive reinforcement. A lot of times that what you recognize is that a lot of players just miss information. They just don't really have the final few puzzle pieces that I do have in my repertoire. For example, some players don't know that a control mage wants to be first in areas. So they TP in late, they try to flank with the champs. And what I'm going to then work on is how can we get them to understand that that's the case? And then how am I going to give them a learning objective that will then allow them to start doing that and start seeing it and start feeling it in game and in outside of game. And that will then lead to improvement. And generally, my goal is to streamline the entire learning process. Like keep you off bad habits, create new habits that will then allow you to improve over the game. And by doing this for, usually when I work with a client for about 6 months, usually we can get to about 6 habits that we then massively increased and got about 200 LP in improvement consistently, which is really, really, really good, of course. it's on average, right? Some people do it in 3 months, some people do it in 9 months, some people are just have a lot of time, some people have a little bit slower time. It's just really, really, really average. And the final thing, which is so good about especially the coaching platform that we're running, is the quick adjustments in closed feedback loops. And this is what a lot of people struggle with, is they don't see certain things, or they don't see that they're slightly mishitting the ball, or they're giving it a little bit of that top spin that you actually don't really want to give to the ball. And I can point that out either in coaching sessions or in these constant feedback loops, because they're constantly ongoing. That's why we got the Vault Questions channel here in the MLA, would then allow you to point you in the right direction, see if you're actually working on your learning objective in the right way. If you've got a specific question about your learning objective or what you're focusing on, I can then put you in the right direction and make sure that you keep working towards creating that new habit instead of falling back into the old habit or creating a new bad habit. And yeah, that's my thesis here on how you actually improve in League. So I hope you guys enjoyed. I spent an insane amount of time on studying this over the past few weeks, and you're trying to truly understand how it works. I already had a little bit of a feeling and a decent idea because of the experience that I've built up, but now understanding how the brain works now also gives me a lot better understanding of what I can actually be applying this in my own coaching sessions. So yeah, I hope you guys learned something. Matter of fact, I know you guys learned something, and I genuinely hope you guys will put this into practice as well, because I want everyone to succeed. And if you're not in MLA already and you want my help, I'm absolutely looking forward to help you. Check out the link in the description, and I'll see you guys there. Peace out, guys.